I remember that Christmas Eve drive like it was yesterday, though I've tried desperately to forget it. The snow had been coming down steady all evening, blanketing the Appalachians in a way that made everything feel distant, muffled, unreal. My friends and I were heading back from a small gathering, just the four of us in my old pickup, singing quietly to keep the car warm and spirits up. I don't know if it was the snow or the quiet that made the forest feel so heavy that night, but something about that road, narrow and winding through the mountains, had always given me a chill. I didn't think much of it at first. It was a familiar drive, the kind I'd made hundreds of times, but that night, it felt different. The fog rolled in suddenly, thicker than anything I'd ever seen, hugging the road like it had weight, curling around the tires, swallowing the headlights, swallowing sound. I slowed instinctively, squinting through the windshield, trying to catch the faint glow of taillights ahead, but the fog blurred everything into an unending white void. My friends laughed nervously, joking about how spooky the forest looked, but their laughter didn't reach their eyes. I had a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the road was no longer ours alone. That's when we saw them. Figures standing just at the edge of the road, barely visible, their forms twisting in the fog. My first thought was travelers, maybe stranded, maybe lost. But there was something wrong. They weren't moving. Not a step. Not a breath. And yet, I could feel eyes on us, pressing in from that white nothingness. I slowed even more, calling out, but the fog seemed to swallow my voice. We passed them, cautiously, hearts pounding, and my rearview mirror caught nothing but mist. And still, that weight, that sense of being watched, stayed with me, curling into my chest like ice. We thought taking a side road might shake the unease, a shortcut back toward home. The snow was heavier there, and the fog thicker, almost alive. It seemed to curl around the car, pressing against the windows as if trying to push us back, whispering in a way I couldn't place. I swear I heard my name carried in the wind, faint but unmistakable, though when I looked to my friends, they were silent, eyes wide and fixed straight ahead. The truck's engine stuttered as we moved slower, the tires crunching against the packed snow. And then knock. Sharp, sudden, rattling against the metal frame of the door. I jumped, my hands clenching the wheel, but when I looked around, no one was there. I checked the back seat instinctively. Empty. But the cold air seemed heavier there, like it had just left a shape behind. The miles crawled by. Every tree along the roadside seemed closer than it should have been, every shadow a shape, every drift a body waiting just out of sight. I could feel the fog pressing in from all sides, a tangible weight, and for a moment I wondered if we would ever reach the next town. My friends didn't speak. Occasionally, one of them would glance at me, eyes wide with the same fear I felt gnawing at my chest. I wanted to tell them it was nothing, that it was just fog, just snow, but my own voice sounded hollow, afraid. Finally, the fog thinned. The mountains gave way to the first lights of the next town, and daylight began to spill over the horizon. Relief washed over me, though it was muted, as if the fog had left something behind. Something in the car. Something in me. My friends and I didn't speak until we were a few miles past the town, the warmth of the rising sun doing little to chase away the hollow dread. Even now, years later, when I drive that stretch, especially on Christmas Eve, I feel it. The fog isn't gone. It waits, curling in the corners, pressing just beyond the headlights. I can't explain it. I don't want to, but I know I'm never alone on that road. I've tried telling people, tried to convince myself it was nerves or the snow or the isolation of those mountains. But I know better. That fog, the figures, the weight in the back seat, it wasn't imagination. And every year when the snow starts falling and the roads go quiet, I think about that night and I feel that same pressure in the air, that same whisper in the wind. And I drive a little faster, never looking too long at the edges of the road, never glancing in the rearview mirror longer than I have to. Because I know it waits, patient and silent, just beyond the fog. It was late that Christmas Eve when we decided to stop at the gas station. The snow had begun falling heavier, dusting the road in white and making the headlights dance across the slick asphalt. The station appeared out of nowhere, a small, forgotten place squeezed between dark pines, like it had been left behind when the world moved on. Even from the road, it looked wrong. Faded paint, windows clouded with grime, a single weak light buzzing above the door. My friends laughed nervously, joking about how the place looked like it belonged in a horror movie, but I felt a pit in my stomach, a sense of hesitation I couldn't shake. Something about it felt alive in a way I couldn't name. The door creaked as we pushed it open, the fluorescent lights flickering above us. The air smelled faintly of oil and mildew, sharp and clinging to the back of my throat. Behind the counter stood a man, wrapped in a threadbare coat, face pale and lined, eyes that seemed both tired and sharp at the same time. He didn't look at us immediately, just hummed something under his breath, like he was counting or waiting for us to say something. And then he smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Evening," he said quietly, and for a moment I had the strangest feeling, like he already knew us, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. He even said our names, casual, like he'd called them off a list, and that was the first real jolt of unease. I wandered down one of the narrow aisles toward the back, telling myself I just needed some chips, some candy, anything to distract from the way my gut was twisting. When I came back around the corner, the counter was empty. My friends were gone. I called their names softly at first, then louder, my voice echoing in the stale, buzzing air. The man behind the counter leaned forward slightly, still smiling, and whispered that they'd gone outside. My chest tightened. I told him I'd go check, and before he could answer, I was out the door and running toward the pumps. The lot was empty except for my car, the snow crunching under my boots, but there were no signs of them anywhere. No footprints leading away. Nothing. The silence hit me harder than the cold. Then I noticed the shadows. They moved differently than they should have, elongated, stretched across the snow, curling around the corners of the building and flickering independently of the weak lights above. I felt a low vibration in my chest, like the air itself was humming, a soft, eerie sound that grew, almost musical, like distant singing just beyond comprehension. Every shadow seemed to lean closer, bending toward me, pressing like the building itself was alive, watching, breathing. I stumbled back toward the door, and the hum seemed to pulse with each step I took. I ran inside, slamming the door behind me, trying to gather my thoughts, but the man wasn't there anymore. Only the empty counter, the faint flicker of the fluorescent light, and that unrelenting hum. I called out again, voice shaking, but there was no answer. Panic clawed at me, cold and sharp, and I forced myself back outside. Maybe they had just wandered, maybe they were playing a prank, but instinct told me this was no ordinary place. I circled the lot, searching desperately, but nothing moved. The shadows twisted and shifted, still pressing closer, still humming. I felt watched from every angle. My hands shook as I got back into the truck, locked the doors and started the engine, the weak headlights barely cutting through the fog and snow that had begun drifting again. By the time I reached the main road, the station was gone. No building, no sign, nothing but an empty field blanketed in snow. My friends were gone as well, vanished without a trace. Only footprints remained, frozen in the fresh snow, perfectly preserved as if nothing had moved at all. The images replayed in my head for days, weeks, years. Shadows that shouldn't move, a hum that didn't belong, the smell of old oil and mildew that clung to my clothes and lingered in my memory. I tried to explain it, tried to tell myself it was a hallucination, the exhaustion of driving, the isolation of those backroads. But deep down I knew better. That place remembered me. And whatever had taken my friends, whatever had waited in the shadows, still waited for others. Every Christmas Eve since, I drive carefully along those roads, eyes scanning every dark corner, ears straining for that low hum. I never stop at forgotten places, never linger. I can't shake the certainty that some places hold grudges, and some things follow. That gas station wasn't just abandoned, it was alive in some way, patient, silent, and hungry for stories like mine. Even now, when I close my eyes at night, I can see the stretched, twisting shadows pressing closer, and I remember the man's smile, slow and knowing. I've never found my friends, and I never will. All I have are the footprints in the snow, frozen in time, and the understanding that the world holds corners we aren't meant to enter, places that remember us long after we think we've left. It was close to midnight when I first saw her standing on the side of that back road, the snow falling lightly around her like it didn't belong there. Christmas Eve, The kind of night where the mountains swallow the horizon and the clouds hang low, heavy and gray, with only a few stars daring to peek through. I slowed my old pickup as I passed, and she lifted a hand, small, pale against the darkness. At first, I thought she might be stranded, someone trying to get home. Something about her posture, the way she stood perfectly still, made me hesitate. But when I pulled over, she smiled at me. Soft, polite, but there was something in the curve of her lips that made the hair on the back of my neck prick. I opened the door and told her to climb in. She did so silently, folding herself carefully into the passenger seat. At first, it felt normal. She said little, only answering my questions with gentle, precise words. But there was a calm about her, a strange weight of familiarity, like I had known her in some life I couldn't remember. She smelled faintly of pine and wood smoke, the kind of smell that lingers in cabins deep in the mountains. I noticed her hands, pale against the dashboard, and for some reason it made me nervous. I didn't know why. The road ahead was dark and winding, the occasional yellow line disappearing under thin sheets of snow. My headlights cut a narrow path through the trees, branches scraping softly against the truck's roof with each turn. It wasn't until we'd driven several miles that I realized something was off. I glanced at the rearview mirror, as I always did, and froze. There was no reflection of her in the glass. At first, I thought it was a trick of the dim light, the shadows from the trees, but the more I looked, the more certain I became. The mirror only showed the road behind me, empty and white with snow. "You're not in the mirror," I said quietly, my voice shaky. She turned to me, her smile widening just enough to unsettle me, and her eyes caught the weak dashboard light, glinting unnaturally. "I don't need to be," she said, her voice calm, almost amused. I tried to laugh it off, a hollow sound that barely reached the cabin ceiling. The road narrowed, and the woods pressed close on either side, skeletal trees like fingers stretching across the sky. The truck's engine droned beneath us, tires crunching over frozen patches. I told myself I was imagining it, that the isolation and the snow had my mind twisting reality, but the feeling of being watched, the sense that she didn't belong there in any normal sense, gnawed at me. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands tight on the wheel, trying to focus on the familiar curves and dips of the mountain pass. We reached the bridge over the river, the steel rails outlined faintly by the dim light. I was talking, trying to fill the silence, and when I glanced at her for the first time in several minutes, she wasn't there. Not in the seat beside me, not on the floor. The door was shut, locked, just as I had left it. I hit the brakes, my heart pounding, and leaned over, calling her name. Nothing. The faint scent of pine and smoke lingered, like she had only just stepped away, but the snow on the ground was undisturbed. No footprints. I swung the truck around, scanning the road ahead and behind. The mountains were quiet, the river silent beneath the bridge, the snowflakes falling in gentle, mocking patterns. Panic hit me fully then, a cold, rigid fear that made my hands numb on the wheel. I slammed the horn, yelled her name again, and the radio cracked with static, spitting distorted whispers that I couldn't make sense of. My stomach twisted, my chest tight, and I realized I wasn't alone in feeling observed. Something about the way the darkness pressed close, the way the road curved like a trap, made it impossible to tell if I was safe. I turned the truck sharply, eyes darting to the rearview mirror again. Empty. Still empty. And yet, I felt her presence, as though she were leaning slightly toward me, her gaze fixed on me, patient and knowing. I drove on, hands shaking, heart pounding, the road bending through the mountains in ways I didn't fully recognize. Snowflakes stuck to the windshield, soft and blinding, and every sound was exaggerated. The creak of the suspension, the hum of the engine, the soft whisper of wind through the trees. I kept expecting her to appear beside me, to look at me with that calm, familiar smile, and yet she never did. I called my friends later, tried to tell someone what happened, but it sounded absurd. How could a person vanish in the middle of a bridge, with no footprints, no trace, as though she had never existed? Even now, years later, the memory is vivid. Every Christmas Eve, when the clouds hang low and the mountains grow quiet, I feel the weight in the passenger seat again. I glance at the rearview mirror, heart hammering, half expecting to see her eyes glinting in the dim light. It's a sensation I can't explain, a presence that's quiet but heavy, patient and unyielding. I drive that back road differently now, carefully, never alone for long, always aware that the air can carry things we don't fully understand, that the mountains have corners where time and people fold into themselves. Some nights, when I wake suddenly in the dark, I smell pine and smoke and feel that same strange calm, the feeling that I am being watched by someone who has known me longer than I have known myself. I tell myself it's memory, or imagination, or the isolation of these mountains, but I know better. She is still there, somewhere, waiting for the same road, the same night, patient as the snow, quiet as the wind. And I know that if I were to stop, if I were to linger, I might find out exactly what happens when a presence like hers chooses you. But some things I've learned are better left unexamined, left as whispers in the night, as shadows across the snow. We thought we were being clever, taking a shortcut through the backwoods to avoid the holiday traffic. The main highway had been clogged with people heading home, the snow slick and thick, and a friend of mine had mentioned an old logging road that could shave off nearly half an hour. It seemed simple enough, just a narrow path winding through the mountains, lined with trees heavy with snow, branches bending low under the weight. At first, the silence was peaceful, almost comforting. The way the snow muffled the tires against the gravel made it feel like the world had gone soft, like time had slowed. It didn't take long before the road started to feel wrong. The snow covered so much that it was barely visible where the path twisted between the trees, and the darkness of the forest seemed to press close. That's when I noticed the first sound. Soft, distant, like the wind brushing across pine needles. But it wasn't quite the wind. There was a rhythm to it, a cadence that seemed deliberate. At first, we all laughed it off, joking that the trees were whispering Christmas carols just for us. But the laughter faded quickly. The sounds grew clearer, forming shapes in our minds. Words carried faintly on the cold air. And then I realized they were saying our names. I called out to the others, trying to convince myself it was just the wind, just our imaginations, but the voices kept repeating, louder now, closer, beckoning us into the woods. My friends froze, eyes wide and pale, trying to laugh it off, but the fear was evident in their shaking hands and stiff posture. I looked at the headlights, straining to see what lay beyond their small cone of light. Shadows moved between the trees, too many to count, flitting just out of focus, like the forest itself was alive, watching. Every time the beam caught them for a second, they vanished, only to appear again a few feet away, stretched and thin like silhouettes against the snow. I was gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. Then the car stuttered, the engine dying suddenly, leaving us stranded in the thick cold. The tires spun uselessly against the ice and packed snow. I tried restarting it, shaking, but it refused to turn over. A heavy smell filled the air, thick and acrid, burning wood, pine sap, something else I couldn't place. My stomach tightened as I realized the voices were closer, more deliberate, moving rhythmically around the car. They weren't just whispering anymore. They were guiding, urging, like the forest wanted us to step out. From the tree line, a figure appeared. Tall, thin, impossibly still, its outline dark against the white snow. It didn't move toward us, didn't speak, but I could feel its gaze pressing against me, tightening my chest, knotting my stomach. My friends were frozen, pale in the weak light, unable to look away. I don't know what instinct finally overrode the fear, but I pushed the truck in a desperate motion, rocking it back and forth until it roared to life. Tires spinning against the snow, we escaped the clearing and didn't look back. Even as we hit the highway and the forest gave way to familiar lights, the unease didn't fade. Something about that stretch of road, the way the shadows clung to the trees, the cadence of the whispers, stayed with me. Years later, every Christmas Eve, I drive cautiously along those backroads, ears straining for a hint of the same cadence, a faint repetition of my name carried on the wind. I still feel the pressure of those unseen eyes in the tree line, and every time the snow piles heavy across the forest, I remember that figure, standing tall and patient, waiting. The memory is like frost in my chest, cold and lingering, a quiet dread that doesn't fade. I've never gone back, never tried to find that road when it was safe or clear. And yet, the whispers, the shadows, the figure, they are never gone. I feel them in the wind that brushes the mountains on quiet nights, in the way the trees sway in winter storms, in the cold that settles behind my ribs when I think of those backwoods. Some places remember you, some waits, patient, for the next time you pass through. That shortcut, which once seemed like a clever idea, became a night I'll never forget. A night where the forest itself seemed alive, guiding, watching, and waiting. Even now, when snow falls softly and I drive alone, I hear the faint echo of whispers, calling my name from somewhere between the trees. I grip the wheel tighter, scanning the edges of the road, my pulse quickening, and I know the truth I can't fully explain. The mountains remember, the forest waits, and some presences never truly leave you. That night, that stretch of road, and that figure in the tree line have haunted me every Christmas Eve since. A lingering dread that's more real than I want to admit. A reminder that some places are not meant for the living to wander.